Have you ever felt like there was something more you were supposed to be doing? I'm not talking about your job. I'm not talking about paying your bills or getting through another Monday. I'm talking about that feeling deep down that says, I know there's more. Maybe you've ignored it. Maybe you convince yourself you're too old. Maybe you think you've messed up too much. Or maybe life has just gotten so loud that you can't hear it anymore. I know that feeling because I lived it. For a long time, I thought God only called pastors, missionaries, or people who had everything all together. I figured people like me, regular, ordinary people, weren't the one God used. I thought, who would listen to me? Because I made mistakes, I've failed, I've questioned myself. I had seasons where I wondered if I was even heading in the right direction. But here's what I've learned. God isn't looking for people with perfect resumes. He's looking for willing hearts. One verse that always stood out to me was Isaiah 6, verse 8. It said, Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send? And who will go for us? And I said, Here I am. Send me. Do you notice something? Isaiah didn't ask for all the details first. He didn't ask for how hard it was going to be. He didn't ask if people would like him. Again, he didn't ask how hard it would be. He didn't ask if people would like him. He simply answered the call. Now, I'm not comparing myself to Isaiah. What I'm saying is this. Every one of us face moments where we have to decide whether we're going to stay comfortable or take a step into something unknown. When I started writing books, I had no idea what I was doing. When I started podcasting, I didn't know if anyone would listen. And the truth is, there's still days when I wonder if anyone will. But I didn't start this because I wanted to become famous. I started because I felt like I had a story worth sharing. Not because my story is better than yours, but because maybe someone out there needs to hear that they're not alone. Maybe if someone listening today is where I was years ago, wondering if God could ever use someone like them. Can I ask you something? What's that one thing you've been putting off? That conversation, that business idea, that ministry, that dream, that forgiveness you've been avoiding. What's been sitting on your heart for months or maybe even years? Sometimes we spend so much time praying for God to open doors that we never notice that He's already opened one. And we're just afraid to walk through it. And I talked about this on my last podcast, you know what I mean? And I'm going to be honest. Fear has stopped me more times than failure ever has. I was always in fear of looking stupid. Fear of people judging me. Fear of not being good enough. Fear that I'd start something and nobody would care. Maybe you felt that too. Maybe you wanted to step out, but you've been waiting until everything made sense. But here's something I learned. Faith rarely gives you the whole map. Usually it shows you the next step. If I had waited until I felt completely qualified, I would have never written a book. I would have never started a podcast. I never would have shared my testimony. I'd still be sitting on the sidelines wondering what if. And I don't want to spend my life asking what if anymore. I'd rather step out, stumble a few times, learn along the way, and trust that God can use imperfect people. Because if God could only use perfect people, none of us would be qualified. So maybe today's question isn't, has God called me? Maybe the better question is, have I been listening? Check it out, because sometimes God calling isn't loud. Sometimes it's the quiet nudge that you can't seem to shake. That thought that keeps coming back. That burden that won't leave your heart. That dream you keep talking yourself out of. Maybe that's where your journey begins. Not with having all the answers, but with being willing to say, God, I don't know where this is going, but I'm willing to take the next step. Because if we're honest, answering the call isn't usually the hardest part. It's everything we tell ourselves that keeps us from answering it. So let's talk about those excuses, because I've made just about every one of them. And you know what's funny? Most of us don't actually say no to God. We just say not yet, maybe next year, maybe when I have more money, maybe when the kids are older, maybe when work is slows down, maybe when life isn't so crazy. And before we know it, years have gone by. I've been there. There's been seasons in my life where I knew I should be doing something, but I kept finding reasons to wait. Not because I didn't believe God, but because I didn't believe in myself. You know, there's a difference. Sometimes our biggest obstacle isn't our faith in God. It's our lack of faith that God can use someone like us. And I'm going to be real with you. Life isn't always easy. I've worked long days. I've worked more than one job. I'm still doing it. I have 2 jobs, trying to find a third job. You know, like I said, I've worked more than one job. I've dealt with financial pressure. I worried about providing for my family. I've wondered how everything was going to get paid. Some of you listening know what I'm talking about. You know, you get up before the sun comes up. You work all day. You come home exhausted. You eat dinner. Maybe spend a little time with your family. Then it's bedtime. And before you know it, you're waking up and doing it all over again. That's real life. Sometimes people talk about purpose. They make it sound like you quit your job tomorrow and everything magically falls into place. That hasn't been my story. For me, purpose has been lived out in the middle of ordinary life. Working, being a husband, being a dad, trying to make wise decisions, trying to become a better man than I was yesterday. The podcast didn't start with thousands of listeners. I don't even have 1,000 listeners. I probably got 30 listeners right now. You know, the book didn't become overnight bestseller. It's still not a bestseller, but I'll still put it out. Everything didn't suddenly become easy because I decided to follow God. If anything, there's been moments when I questioned if I should keep going. Maybe you've had those moments too. Maybe you started something and wondered if it was worth it. You post something, nobody responds. You work hard, nobody notices. You know, you try to improve, people still criticize you. It's easy to think, maybe this just isn't for me. But check it out, this is what I realized. Success isn't always measured by numbers. Sometimes success is simply being obedient. Showing up is success. Sometimes getting back up after you fall is success. Sometimes one step when you feel like quitting, that's success. Because none of us know what God is doing behind the scenes. There may be someone you'll never meet whose life changes because you decided not to quit. Think about it. One conversation, one act of kindness, one encouraging word, one podcast episode, one decision to keep going. You may never know how far that reaches. Check it out. Jesus called fishermen not because they were famous, not because they were perfect, not because everyone looked up to them. He simply said, "Follow me." And they had a decision to make. Stay where they were or trust where he was leading them. I don't know about you, but I spent enough time letting fear make decisions for me. I don't want fear driving anymore. One excuse I've heard and I've always used is this: I'm just an ordinary person. Exactly. So was David before he became king. So was Peter before he preached. So was Moses before he led Israel. Again, I'm not comparing myself or you to them. I'm saying God has always worked through ordinary people willing to trust him. That gives me hope because I'm ordinary. I still have bad days. I still have doubts. I'm still making mistakes and God is still patient with me. Maybe your calling isn't standing behind the microphone. Maybe it's being the best husband you can be. Maybe it's being the best wife you can be, the best dad, the best mom. Maybe it's mentoring somebody at work, helping a neighbor, serving at your church, starting a business you've been dreaming about, writing that book you've been sitting in your heart, calling that person you needed to forgive. Don't compare your calling to someone else. Comparison will rob you of joy that comes simply from walking the path God has placed in front of you. Your journey isn't supposed to look like mine. And mine isn't supposed to look like yours. So let me ask you another question. What's the excuse you've been holding on to? I don't have enough time. I don't know enough. I'm too old. I'm too young. I failed too many times. My past disqualifies me. I've believed some of those lies myself. But they are still lies. Your past may explain where you've been. It doesn't have to decide where you're going, buddy. Maybe today isn't about making the giant leap. Maybe it's about taking that small step. Maybe one phone call, writing one page, recording one video, praying one honest prayer, having one difficult conversation. Small steps may not feel impressive, but they move you forward. And forward is always better than standing still. So what happens when you finally stop making excuses and decide to answer the call? It doesn't mean life suddenly gets easy, but it does change the way you walk through it. That's what I want to talk to you about next. So, what happens when you finally answer the call? I tell you what doesn't happen. Life doesn't suddenly become perfect. The problems don't disappear overnight. Your bills don't magically pay themselves. People don't automatically support you. And you don't wake up the next morning with every answer. If anything, sometimes it feels like challenges get bigger. But something inside of you changes. You stop living wondering what if. Instead, you start living with purpose. And I'll be honest, there have been times when I've questioned everything. There have been days I wondered if I should keep podcasting. Days when I thought, is anybody ever listening? Is this making a difference? Am I wasting my time? If you ever created something like starting a business, wrote a book, coaching a team, raised kids, or poured your heart into anything, you know those thoughts can creep in. But then I remind myself, this was never about numbers. It's never about fame, never about trying to impress people. Check it out. If one person hears something that helps them keep going, then it was worth hitting the record button. I've learned something over these few years. Purpose isn't always found in the destination. Sometimes purpose is found in the process. It's found in becoming. And that's one of the reasons this podcast carries those words. Faith, purpose, and becoming. Not because I've arrived, but because I'm still becoming. I'm becoming a better husband, a better father, grandfather, leader, a better friend, a better man than I used to be. Not perfect, just growing. And I hope you are too. One of the biggest lies we believe is this: I'll start when I'm ready. Can I let you in on something? You may never completely feel ready. I didn't. Most people don't. If we waited until fear disappeared, we'd never move. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is moving away. That's what answering the call looks like. Taking that next step, even when you're nervous, even when you're unsure, even when you don't know what's waiting around the corner. I think about Peter when getting out of the boat. People usually focus on the fact that he started sinking. But I think about something different. He was the only one willing to step out. The other disciples stayed where it was safe. Yeah, Peter experienced something nobody else experienced because he was willing to leave the boat. Yes, he stumbled. Yes, he lost focus. But Jesus reached for him. That reminds me that even when faith isn't perfect, God's faithfulness is. Maybe today your boat is comfort. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's insecurity. It's your past. Maybe it's the opinions of people around you. Whatever it is, you weren't meant to stay there forever. Growth usually starts where comfort ends. I want to leave you with one thought that challenges me over and over again. What if the person you're supposed to become is waiting on the other side of your one decision? One yes, one step, one act of obedience. Not because you're trying to earn God's love. You've already been given that. But because you trust Him enough to follow where He's leading. As I look back on my own life, I can see moments where I thought God was silent. Now I realize He wasn't silent. He was preparing me. The struggles taught me something. The setbacks taught me something. The disappointment taught me something. Even the mistakes taught me something. Would I choose every difficult season again? Probably not. But I can honestly say God used every season to shape the man I'm becoming. So today I want to challenge you. Not with some huge life-changing decisions. Just one step. Maybe today your step is to forgive someone. Maybe it's to finally pray again after a long time. Maybe it's to write down that dream you've been afraid to admit. Maybe it's to tell your spouse you appreciate them. Maybe it's to call your parents. Maybe it's to serve someone without expecting anything in return. Maybe it's finally to stop letting your past tell you who you are. Whatever your step is, take it. Because no one else can answer the call that God has placed on your life. Not your spouse, not your parents, not your pastor, not your best friend. Only you can decide whether you'll answer. And if you're listening today thinking, Steve, I don't even know what my calling is. That's okay. You don't have to know every step. Just take the next one. Keep showing up. Keep praying. Keep growing. Keep trusting. And little by little, God has a way of revealing the path as you walk it. You don't have to have your entire future figured out. You just have to be willing to answer the call. As we wrap up today's conversation, I want to leave you with one final thought that's been on my heart. It's the same reminder I need just as much as anyone else listening. As we wrap up today's conversation, like I said, I want to leave you with one final thought. I don't know where you are in life right now. Maybe things are going great and you're seeing God move in ways you've never imagined. Maybe you're in a season where you're questioning everything. Maybe you're carrying pain that nobody else knows about. Maybe you're wondering if your best days are behind you. Or maybe this is the first time in a long time you even stopped long enough to think about your purpose. Wherever you are, I want you to hear this. God isn't looking for perfection. He's looking for willingness. I know because that's been my story. If God waited until I had everything figured out, I wouldn't have written a single book. I wouldn't have started this podcast. I wouldn't be sitting behind this microphone talking to you today. I'm still learning. I'm still growing. I'm still making mistakes. I'm still becoming. And maybe that's the point. Maybe answering the call isn't about arriving. Maybe it's about taking one faithful step after another, trusting that God will meet you along the way. So this week, I want to challenge you. Don't worry about 5 years from now. Don't even worry about next month. Just ask yourself one question. What's the next step God is asking me to take? Maybe it's forgiving someone. Maybe it's saying yes to an opportunity you've been afraid of. Maybe it's putting down something that's been holding you back. Maybe it's finally believing that your past doesn't get the final say. Whatever that step is, take it. Not because it'll be easy. Not because you'll have every answer. Not because it's not going to be easy. Check it out. Because you trust God. You trust the one who's leading you. Thank you for allowing me to be a small part of your journey today. And there's one thing I hope you remember from this episode is this. Don't let fear answer a call that was meant for you. Thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me. If this conversation encouraged you, challenged you, or made you think, I'd love for you to share it with someone who might need it. Just remember, you don't have to be perfect to be used by God. You just have to be willing to take the next step. Keep the faith, walk in purpose, never stop becoming the person God created you to be, because that's your faith, your purpose, you're becoming. This is the SDM Effect. I see you next time. Love you. Peace.